Hi, my name's Elizabeth, and I have a problem. I buy books faster than I can read them, and it's left me in a conundrum where I have an entire bookshelf full of books that I have purchased and not yet read. And every time I come into this room and I see this whole bookshelf of books I haven't read yet, staring me down, making uncomfortably elongated eye contact, I feel uncomfortable and like a failure. So I thought I would start off the year strong, the first reading vlog of the year, trying to tackle my physical TBR. It was a goal I had last year, but last year was a wash, okay? I didn't achieve almost any of my goals. I did reach my reading goal, but that's about it, okay? I did not make nearly as much progress on my physical TBR as I had initially planned and hoped for, but we're gonna fix it in 2025, okay? We're new people, new year, new us. We have the ability to do hard things, and the hard thing I'm doing in this reading vlog is spending 48 hours making an initial dent in my physical TBR, which has gotten out of hand and is making me feel ashamed of myself, okay? And I thought for some extra dopamine, some extra goal crushing, I would focus on the books on my 25 in 2025 spread in my reading journal. I'll link my reading journal setup if you missed it. I make this spread every year, and it's just a collection of books that I really want to get to in that calendar year. Books that I'm really excited about or have been sitting on my shelves for a while that I want to remind myself exist and kind of motivate myself to get into. And last year I did an abysmal job of reading my 24 books in 2024. And this year is going to be different. I'm just gonna see how many I can read in the next 48 hours to make a dent in my physical TBR so I can get some good momentum for the rest of the year and we can actually make some progress. Unlike last year, who we're just going to ignore and put in a dark corner in a closet in the depths of my memory palace, okay? I am not going to be reading nonstop. I'm not gonna be pulling all-nighters. I am too old for that, okay? I'm old and tired. I'm not that old, but I am tired. I'm not gonna have all the free hours in the day to read, but I am trying to challenge myself by putting a time limit on it because unfortunately my brain needs deadlines and pressure to do literally anything. So I'm trying to use my own psyche against me. I kind of want to start with something short for that, quick win. I feel like these two might be the shortest from my 25 in 2025. The Old Man Who Read Love Stories and Bitter Water Opera by Louise Sepúlveda and Nicolette Polek. This one is about a dancer in 1967 who comes across an abandoned theater. This one is the spellbinding classic tale of man and nature, honor and adventure, in which the peaceful life of an aging, book-loving widower in the Ecuadorian jungle is upended when an ignorant tourist provokes a mother ocelot. The description of this one is definitely drawing me in a lot more. I feel like I'm more in the mood for this story. This one's supposed to be a series of vignettes, sort of a personal journey and figuring out your place in the world. It seems a little bit more internal and cerebral. This one feels a little bit more exciting and climactic. So I'm very excited to read this one. Hopefully it won't take me too long to read and it will start us off on the right foot for this reading vlog. I don't really know how many books I'll get to in this video, but my hope is to read 3. I feel like if I finish 3 books, I will feel accomplished. And if one of those 3 could be a 5-star, that would be great. Send your good vibes my way. And with that very chaotic introduction out of the way, I am going to go start this. I'm very excited. Wish me luck. Very late night last night, which is not uncommon for me. I'm a night owl and also my sleep schedule has been atrocious. for the last couple months. It just keeps getting worse. But I filmed the intro to this video at about 11 o'clock at night and then stayed up way too late. So this morning when I got up with my alarm and came down for some coffee and to continue with The Old Man Who Read Love Stories, I was feeling pretty intensely like a zombie. So I decided to grab some Magic Mind for that extra boost that I really needed so my brain would wake up and I could actually focus on the words I was reading. Magic Mind is a daily mental performance shot and it tastes delicious and it works so well to help me really rein my brain in from the chaos. I'm a huge fan of Magic Mind and they are kindly sponsoring this video. And it's really one of those things that is better the more consistently you take it. So drinking Magic Mind every single day, you have those gradual compounding effects and you feel more and more that really focused, energetic, calm clarity without all the side effects you get from one too many cups of coffee, like shakiness and jitteriness and trouble sleeping at night, which are side effects I get pretty easily. I have always been someone who drinks a lot of coffee, but I do tend to feel a lot of physical side effects from too much caffeine. So I really love that I can use Magic Mind in conjunction with my daily cup of coffee to get the most out of both and really support my brain in being as focused and alert and productive as possible, even after a poor night's sleep. Speaking of sleep, Magic Mind has recently come out with a brand new product, their Sleep Elixir, which I cannot wait to try because my sleep is horrendous. I need help and I need it fast. Magic Mind Sleep Elixir is all about helping you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and get a deeper, more restful sleep overall, which are all things that I need help with. Just like the mental performance shot from Magic Mind, their Sleep Elixir is made up of high quality ingredients from the best sources, each and every one backed by hundreds of scientific studies. Their Sleep Elixir is also melatonin free. So if you, like me, tend to get very vivid nightmares when you use melatonin, there is no need to fear with Magic Mind's Sleep Elixir. I really can't wait to try this. I have a feeling it's going to be such a game changer, just like Magic Mind's mental performance shot has been. Magic Mind really has our backs, covering both our daytime and our nighttime to help us achieve mental wellness and mental wealth. It's a brand new year, which means it's the perfect time to focus on your mental wealth, to take care of your brain, and Magic Mind wants to help you do it. Because Magic Mind is sponsoring this video, you can click the link in my description box to get 45% off their exclusive bundle of both the mental performance shot and the Sleep Elixir. That's 45% off, so click the link in my description box to get the bundle. Thank you again to Magic Mind for sponsoring this video. And now let's chat about the first half of The Man Who Read Love Stories. Now, I didn't realize this when I picked this and was talking about it in the introduction, which you probably realized if you know anything about this book, but as I started reading, I realized what I knew when I picked it out but have forgotten since November, which is that this is a classic of Latin American literature and it was originally published in the 80s. I just realized how old I am because the 80s were 40 years ago. That's disturbing. I did not remember that fact, and the fact that Luis Sepúlveda is a famous author from Chile who had an absolutely ridiculous life. I read the introduction and I feel like I need to read a memoir or a biography of some kind because his life was ridiculous. And this story is set in a fictional town in Ecuador. So I am wondering now if this could count toward my Reading Around the World challenge. But the question is, would it count for Chile or would it count for Ecuador? Because I typically try to pick books for the challenge that are written by an author from a particular country, but also that the story is set there, at least in part, when I can. So I question what this should count for. My gut is saying it should count for Chile, but then I feel like maybe I should read a book from a Chilean author that is also set in Chile. So let me know what you think in the comments. Should this count? Should I just read another book by a Chilean author? I will eventually in my lifetime. Hopefully, but you know, for the challenge. Anyway, let me know what you think. But I'm really enjoying this. It's definitely very fast paced. It's quite short, which obviously is part of the reason why I picked it as sort of a quick read to get us started. So halfway through is just under 80 pages and we're following the old man who reads love stories. He's an interesting character so far. We've learned a little bit about his background. We just learned in the last chapter I read why he likes to read love stories and sort of the genesis of that habit for him. I'm finding him intriguing as a character. I'm finding the setting very interesting. I'm enjoying the themes that are surrounding colonialism and settlers who have a lack of respect for the natural world and the natural environment, the ecological balance of an area that sort of come in and use whatever they want to use for their own benefit and then leave disaster in their wake. So there's a bit of that environmental destruction commentary, as well as the colonialism and racism towards Native people by the settlers. And there's also quite a bit of dry humor injected here and there. The writing, for the most part, is not particularly lyrical. I have highlighted moments and quotes that I quite enjoy, but largely it's not overtly descriptive or too flowery or anything. It is quite direct in the writing style, but it does have a bit of a dry humor to it because it is so direct, and some of those jokes are just kind of dropped in with no other commentary and no attention brought to it. So sometimes it takes a couple seconds as you keep reading to register that that was a joke and register the humor of the situation, which I kind of like. I'm enjoying that. I feel like that sort of fits my sense of humor, where I do also kind of have a dry humor where I drop jokes in without changing my tone of voice or my facial expression at all, and people don't always get that I'm joking. I don't know why I'm like this, but I'm enjoying it here, and I don't know that I can say too much more about it because really I've only read 75 pages and not too much has happened yet, but I am finding it interesting, and it's quite a quick, easy read, and I like the writing style. So reserving judgment, I guess. I can't make any firm opinions at the halfway point right now, but I'm liking it. So if it continues in this vein, I think I'll end up enjoying this overall. I am interested to see how much more exploration of the themes we're going to get, or if the second half is going to focus more on character development and be a little bit more character driven with our old man and his love stories. There's definitely some pretty brutal content already in violence, both animal violence to people, people violence to animals, and a lot of bloody tooth extractions because one of the most prominent side characters so far is a dentist. And maybe it's just me and having my own particular trauma around teeth, but I am finding that a little bit difficult to read, even though it doesn't get too graphic in its descriptions. Just the knowledge that people are having all their teeth pulled out and their mouths are filling with blood. It's a lot, okay? It's kind of gross. So just, be warned about that. There's definitely been some bloody death already, but I'm interested to see where it goes. But I don't think I have more thoughts. This is a very quick update, but this is also a very short book. So I think I'll save any other thoughts for once I finish the book. So I'm gonna go do that, and I'll be back when I'm done to share my final thoughts on The Man Who Read Love Stories. Okay, so I finished The Old Man Who Read Love Stories, and it definitely continued in the same vein as the first half. It didn't really do anything surprising or twisty, I wouldn't say. Not that I expected it to, but my opinions and comments from the first update still stand. It's definitely a, short parable exploring the impact of settlers or colonizers on the natural landscape of the rainforest of the Amazon, the ways that they impact indigenous communities and the indigenous people, the ways that they impact the animals and the environment itself, stripping the land of its natural resources for their own gain and sort of leaving it wounded and broken in their wake, sort of without any concern. I think my favorite thing about this book is that the jungle itself, the Amazon itself, sort of takes revenge on these intruders through the use of the ocelot, the angry, female rage-induced mother ocelot whose cubs were brutally murdered by an intruder against all regulations and expectations of sort of proper hunting seasons and practices in the area. The cubs are never meant to be killed, and no ocelots should be killed in this particular season, sort of the tail end of their breeding season as they are raising the next generation, which makes sense because if you don't allow them to replenish themselves and you continue to kill them, you will eventually run out of animals to kill. I say this as a longtime vegan. I'm not a fan of killing animals in general, but if you are going to, there are sort of balances in nature, right, to maintain the whole ecological system in balance. And the idea here is that these settlers are coming in, these colonizers, the gold prospectors, the hunters, all these people are coming in from outside and they have no real connection to the land. They don't really understand that natural balance and they set everything into chaos. And in this case, the jungle fights back, or the ocelot mother fights back. And there is something sort of satisfying about that revenge from nature. And the themes explored, while they're explored pretty briefly because the novel is so short, I did find to be very interesting. They're important themes. They're deeply relevant. I enjoyed the simple writing style. There were some really beautiful moments in the writing, but it was quite direct and sparse. Like I said in the halfway update, the dry humor I quite enjoyed. There were quite a few funny moments. I didn't love that the mayor is a character who is larger, and the way that it's written makes it seem like his body is meant to be some sort of a representation of all of his flaws because he is ignorant and arrogant and racist and greedy and lazy, and it feels like the fact that he is overweight and he sweats a lot not only lead to him being made fun of constantly by all the local people, but also there are constant comments about his weight over and over and over again. And, didn't love that because people of all sizes can be arrogant and ignorant and racist and greedy and lazy and terrible. And lots of people of any body type can be none of those things. And it's really not related or relevant. Things have changed a lot since the 80s, even though to me, the 80s still don't feel that far away. He was repugnant because of his personality and his body didn't need to come into it. So that bothered me a little bit and definitely was a drawback for me in reading this just because it came up so often, especially in the second half. It just felt constant. But I did like the main character, Antonio. I found him very endearing. His love of love stories and his joy at discovering books and discovering his love of literature and the way that he really relishes the words and repeats the words and the sentences until he memorizes them and really sort of tastes them like they're a gourmet meal and tries to reason out and sort of deduce the meaning of words and concepts that he hasn't come across. I just found that very endearing and relatable, I guess, as a lover of words. I also found it very interesting that his ability to sort of read the jungle and read the signs of what the animals have done or not done, just his ability to understand his environment so well because of the time spent in the environment trying to learn it and respect it. That was really lovely to see and just sort of reinforced those themes of respecting the environment and the natural world and trying to live in harmony with it and sort of fit ourselves into our small piece of the larger system instead of trying to control it in the domineering way that humans always try to do, trying to take control of the entire system and pretty much immediately destroying it because, again, it's a delicate balance and we're not as smart as we think we are. So I really enjoyed those sort of moments of him just slowly pointing out all of the signs, all the clues, and showing how he came to the conclusions he did about what happened. And it's basically a revenge story. story from the rainforest, which, yeah, there's something satisfying about that. I appreciate that. I found it very interesting, and I would be curious to read not only more from this author, but also the introduction mentions maybe 20 Latin American authors and just briefly describes the kind of literature they write, and I immediately highlighted every name and am going to be looking them up and trying to find their books so I can read them because they sound fascinating. And honestly, in my experience of my Reading Around the World challenge so far, I found that I really enjoy Latin American literature. So many of the books that I've read from Latin America in the last couple of years have been so fantastic and really resonated with me on a very deep level. And I can't say that I have read much Latin American literature before the last couple years and before specifically starting on my journey to try to read from every country around the world. So I'm very glad to discover my love of Latin American literature and to add this to my pile of Latin American classics that I have now read. I think I'm probably sitting around 4 stars. I thought this was really great. It's very effective and very straightforward in its message, but I feel like it does it with that little bit of twinkling humor that I feel I've come to expect from Latin American literature. I'm going to do a super short spoiler section because I just want to talk about the ending very briefly, but I don't want to spoil it in case you want to pick this up. So, quick spoilers. I did find it sad that Antonio is forced to end the ocelot's rampage and kill the ocelot to try to restore the Amazon into some sort of balance, because she is essentially mad with rage as much as an ocelot can be and is just continuing to seek out and kill any humans she comes across, even though it's not her fault and she didn't start this imbalance and it doesn't feel like justice that she should be punished for it. He kind of has to take it into his own hands and end it for the good of everyone, for all the people who live there, including the indigenous people and the locals, and he feels such a overwhelming sense of shame and despair at being forced to do such a thing and to kill such a beautiful animal who was put through so much suffering unnecessarily. And I just felt like that was not only heartbreaking to read and quite upsetting to read, honestly, but also that this destruction of that balance not only impacts the environment and the wild animals, but also the people who live there. For him to feel so much disgust at being driven to kill the ocelot in general, but also to kill the ocelot with a gun that feels so unnatural in his hands and feels like such a betrayal to the land that he loves, is just heartbreaking. And I felt it was a very poignant way to end the story, if upsetting and sad, because, you know, I kind of wanted the ocelot to just continue on her rampage a little longer and kill everyone who deserved it, because there were quite a few people who got away scot-free. But I think it was an ending that made sense and really drove home the message, as hard as it was to read. And I did feel like the ending, the way it was written, was quite emotional and very poignant. The last couple of pages are just so beautifully written. The old man stroked her, ignoring the pain in his injured foot, and wept tears of shame, feeling unworthy, degraded, not at all the victor after the battle. His eyes misty with tears and rain, he pushed the animal's body to the river bank, and the waters carried her away into the jungle deeps, toward territory never profaned by the white man, toward the confluence with the Amazon, toward the rapids where she would be destroyed by razor-edged rocks, forever safe from vile beasts. Then, in a fit of rage, he threw in the gun and watched it sink without glory, a metal monster despised by all living creatures. And a little bit more talking about all those who hoard on his virgin Amazonia, and then ending with, leaning on it, he set off in the direction of El Idilio, his hut, and his novels that spoke of love in such beautiful words they sometimes made him forget the barbarity of man. And yeah, I just found that very moving and very beautiful. So that's it for spoilers. I just wanted to quickly talk about the ending, but I also wanted to read one quote: "Books that lay beckoning to him from that high table, innocent of the chaotic vista of a past that Antonio José Bolivar preferred to forget, leaving open the wells of memory to be filled with the delights and torments of loves that outlasted time." So even though most of it is very straightforward and very simple in its language, again, there are just some very beautiful moments that tugged on my heart. So anyways, that is The Old Man Who Read Love Stories by Luis Sepúlveda, and I really enjoyed this. 4 stars from me. Very curious to read more from him and all the other authors mentioned in the introduction. And now I'm gonna pick what I'm gonna read next. I wanna try something that's hopefully very different. You know, this is one that I have been drawn to ever since I saw the cover and the title. Let me read the quick description, the quick blurb for you. A radical literary sensation from South Korea about an alien's hunt for food that transforms into an existential crisis about what it means to be human. Dolki Min's haunting, darkly hilarious debut novel is part psychological thriller and part searing critique of the social structures that marginalize those who are different. So ever since I first heard of this book, I've been wanting to read it. It sounds fantastically weird and sounds like it has some really interesting themes that I love. Y'all know, if you've been here for a bit, that I love stories that explore what it means to be human. I love aliens. I love weird lit. It also seems like this might have some darker, maybe even horror-leaning elements, or at least thriller elements. And I just think that sounds delightfully strange and interesting. So I think I'm gonna read this one next, Walking Practice. I've been wanting to read this for a while, so I'm excited. Hopefully this will be as good as I have been expecting it to be. I would predict this to be a 5-star read for me because it seems so up my alley, so cross your fingers and toes for me that I'm gonna love this as much as I hope I'm going to love it. So I'm gonna go do that and I'll be back soon. So I'm back and I have finished Walking Practice. I meant to come back halfway through to give my mid-book thoughts and feelings, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, this book was so short and propulsive and very easy to just absorb by osmosis. I just kept reading until it was over. So here we are, and I'll just share my final thoughts on this very strange little book, and it is a very strange book. And you know, that's a compliment coming from me. I feel like the more screwed up my face is when I talk about how weird a book is, the better. This was very strange, both in its premise, but also in its execution. It definitely has some experimental form things going on, which I just eat up. I love when authors try new things, and I think this is even more interesting to me because it seems like a lot of the formatting choices were actually made by the translator because of the differences between written Korean and written English. The original author, Dolki Min, used aspects of written Korean to really emphasize the changing pace and tension between words, and separating characters and then smushing them together to kind of give this alien more of an alien quality. And the translator was talking about how they couldn't do the same thing in the same way in English because it's just such a different language. And so they had to find their own way to kind of get that idea across. And I feel like they did a really great job. And I love that. I could probably go on a rant for days about how interesting I find the whole concept of translation and just how collaborative it has to be, especially in a case like this, and how this final form of this book, the English form of this book, is its own entity entity because it has been put in a different language that has its own feeling and connotation and writing style and just all these little factors that can really change the meaning. And a translator's job can be such a difficult one, trying to find that balance of being as true to the original as possible, but also making changes where needed so that the book actually can be absorbed by people whose brains are different because the language they speak and read and listen to is a different language with a different structure. And anyway, I did a mixed media reading, so I also listened to the audiobook as I was reading, and the audiobook narrator did an amazing job as well of really trying to bring that to life and really playing with their voice, both in sort of stretching words out and smashing words together like the text is written, but also changes of pitch and intonation and tone and vocal quality in a really interesting way that, again, really enhanced that alien quality. Anyway, I just went on a bit of a tangent, but let me tell you the basic premise here. So we have an alien as our protagonist, and this alien has ended up on Earth without enough fuel to take off again in their spaceship. And so they're living in their spaceship in the middle of the forest, and each day they go through the painstaking process of transforming their body from their natural, gigantic, very alien form with many more limbs than we have and many, many razor-sharp teeth. And they take the time to turn themselves into a human, and then they go out and meet up with a variety of humans throughout the day for hookups, and after they get their rocks off, they eat the humans. So they're nourishing both their physical body in a, food sense, but they're also nourishing themselves in a more entity-to-entity connection and trying to remedy their loneliness through random hookups, which is a very human thing to do if you think about it. Maybe not the literal nourishment from their body, but, nourishing the lonely void that is your heart with casual carnal activities is a very human thing to do. And we follow the protagonist as they make their way from appointment to appointment, have sex, eat the human, repeat, and wax poetic about their own experience of the world and their struggles living on Earth as a creature that evolved in a very different environment, and their musings on humans and how odd we are and how attached we are to labels and rules and boxes for things like gender. And it's a very weird book. It's a very interesting book. And you might be able to tell, overall, I really liked this a lot. At its core, it's an extended metaphor for queerness, for existing in the world as a queer person, and, being someone who doesn't necessarily fit in gender role boxes as neatly as the world wants you to, and having that othering, that dehumanization on a day-to-day basis, being looked at like a monster for not fitting all of these unspoken rules, and having to put yourself in dangerous situations to try to find that human connection or alien connection. And I do think it works quite well as a metaphor for queerness. The othering and the dehumanization is so present through everything, and there's just so much time spent kind of deconstructing the idea of gender and how silly it is that we're so rigid about it as humans, and this alien sort of having to force themselves to understand and learn our conceptualization of gender, of a binary gender, so that they can try to force themselves into those boxes when they are out in public and out of the safety of their home. And that metaphor is confirmed by the translator, and they talk about this being a book about queerness. But I also felt that a lot of this book could be applicable and felt like it was speaking to the experience of those with disabilities or chronic illness. So much of this alien's experience has to do with having to constantly think about how their body is functioning or not functioning. They essentially have to be aware of keeping their body together, holding it together at every moment, because if they relax for even an instant, their body will try to revert to its natural shape. And that would be very dangerous for them when they're out in public. And so they are constantly hyper aware of their body and how it's working, and they're constantly exhausted and struggling to do things that we think of as being, very basic things like climbing 5 steps. For them takes so much time and effort and is so excruciatingly painful. And it really did feel like seemingly a really odd way, but honestly a very poignant and effective way to demonstrate what it can be like to exist with chronic illness or chronic pain or disability, and just how much more difficult these day-to-day tasks and just existing in your body can be. Not only physically exhausting, but also mentally exhausting. And that's just something that you're constantly thinking about. And I think it is a very interesting, very unique, very, like I said, propulsive reading experience. And if it weren't for one specific aspect of this story, I would be giving it 5 stars. And I'm very sad to say, but unfortunately I can't, because this book had some glaring fat phobia. The alien protagonist is repeatedly and pretty viciously fat phobic to multiple characters at multiple instances, and just felt really reductive and, gross to read, but also just so ironic and counter to what I think the message of the book is, unless the point was that the alien dehumanizes others for unimportant differences in their bodies as much as they are dehumanized and othered, and they don't recognize that hypocrisy and the fact that they're doing that to other people. I mean, this main character, this alien, is not a paragon of virtue. They're essentially a mass murderer. They're doing it to survive, but still a mass murderer. So maybe they're not meant to be a good person, and maybe it's meant to be overtly hypocritical, and that's supposed to be a point that's being made, but I didn't feel, whether it was from the original work or from the translation or a combination thereof, it didn't do enough to make it clear that that was meant to be commentary or a point of hypocrisy or some sort of irony. To me, it felt like an inherent bias that was coming through in the work, and it was pretty upsetting to read, and I really felt like it took away from what the book was trying to say and what it was trying to explore in a way that I found quite sad and upsetting. I don't want to say too much more because I really don't want to spoil it, but I do think this book has the potential to make people feel very seen in a way that can be very valuable and special. I just wish it hadn't marred that with alienating another group. I did really enjoy the process of reading this, as much as most of it is just sex and murder, which is not normally what I go for in my books. But again, it doesn't feel like any of the sex or any of the murder is meant to be sort of sensationalized or enjoyable to read about. It's part of this metaphor and part of this alien's insatiable hunger, both literally and figuratively. So yeah, that's this book. Those are my thoughts. Like I said, I'm sitting at 4 stars-ish right now. We'll see how I feel about it over time and if my feelings about it change over time, but I would be really curious to hear your thoughts. If you have somehow read this book, please let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I would love to talk to people about this. I don't know if there's anyone in my life I could recommend this to who would actually want to read it and then have a discussion with me about it. So yeah, hopefully one of you has at least, and you can share your thoughts in the comments and we can talk, because very weird, very interesting, very thought-provoking book. So yeah. Okay, that's Walking Practice by Dolki Min. And I'm gonna try to read one more book for this video. I have a feeling that I might have to film the final update for it tomorrow morning, but I'm gonna try to finish whatever the next book I pick is by 11 or midnight tonight, so that it'll be 48 hours since I started filming this video. But I might have to film the update tomorrow because I'll probably be tired at that point and I won't want to be on camera and or won't be able to be coherent in talking about the book. So let's pick the final book. And I did actually go through some of the books earlier today. I just knocked over a pile of books on my floor. It's fine. I did go through all the options earlier today trying to decide what I wanted to read next, and I kind of narrowed it down to these 4. But I think Fruit of the Dead is the winner. I'm most intrigued by this concept, and I just can't get over how gorgeous this cover is. I really try not to let covers influence my choices, but I'll just point out that all 3 books I'm reading for this video have absolutely fantastic covers, and I can't help it that I am a very visual creature. I'm a very artistic person, and I love a beautiful book cover, okay? A hypnotic contemporary reimagining of the Persephone and Demeter myth set over the course of one summer on a lush private island about addiction and sex, family and independence, and who holds the power in a modern underworld. A tale that explores love, control, obliteration, and America's own late capitalist mythos. I don't know how likely it is that this is going to be a 5-star read, but I am crossing my fingers and hoping, because I would really like to have a 5-star read for this video, but we'll see. Wish me luck. I'm going to go read this. I hope I love it and give it 5 stars, or at least it's interesting so we can have a hopefully entertaining conversation about it. I am halfway through Fruit of the Dead, and I don't know how I feel. On the one hand, I am enjoying it. I think what's really keeping me the most engaged so far is that the writing is actually quite beautiful. There are quite a few passages that I find very lyrical and evocative and engaging, and there is a bit of a trance-like, hazy quality to some of the prose that I'm really enjoying and finding quite immersive. And I like the idea of this being a contemporary retelling of Persephone and Demeter, and seemingly meant to be more focused on the mother-daughter relationship of Demeter and Persephone, and not so much Persephone and Hades, which I think is the story that is more often retold. And I like that in theory, but I'm not sure I love how these characters are coming together. And not that they don't feel realistic, because I think they do feel like they're real and they're very flawed, but they're just really unlikable, I guess, is what I'm getting at. I just don't think Corey, our Persephone, is very smart or observant or particularly engaging as a protagonist. I just feel like her personality so far is that she's stuck and lost and doesn't know who she is, which is fair, but it's not that interesting. I know about her tragic backstory and that she doesn't always get along with her mom and she didn't get into college, but I don't know anything about her. What are her interests? What kind of person is she? Is she serious? Is she funny? Is she shy? Is she gregarious? Is she really thoughtful? Or is she someone who is just sort of more living in the moment? There's very little to her personality. The thing that we hear the most about her is how beautiful she is, which good for her, but doesn't really give me much to work with in terms of her character. She's not super engaging to me as seemingly the heart of this book. And then we have her mom, Emer. I guess that comes from Demeter. She works for an NGO, and we start off when she's on a business trip to China. But Emer, as a character, also very unlikable. Again, maybe not unrealistic, but she's a very militant granola mom, kind of, but also like a high-flying, very image-conscious, high up in her NGO corporate type. So that's an interesting mix. And the only real interaction we've seen between her and her daughter is in a flashback, and it's when her daughter tells her something that she went through, sort of reveals something difficult, looking for support from her mom, and her mom just totally shuts down and is very cold to her daughter. And we first see it sort of through her daughter's eyes, through Corey's eyes, and I was thinking, wow, what a terrible mom, what a horrible way to react. And then we see it through her eyes, and I think it's supposed to humanize her and give us her perspective in that moment, and it gave us more of her perspective, but it certainly didn't make me feel that her reaction was at all called for or an okay way for a mom to react in that moment. Super cold, super cruel, honestly. Felt victim blaming and just really not how a mom should react, or any supportive person in someone's life should react when they tell them something difficult that they've gone through and they need support. And being in her mind made it even worse because her internal monologue was even more pointedly victim blaming and unsupportive. I don't know how exactly the author is going to get us to a point where we feel like they can have some sort of a reconciliation, if that is in fact the goal. But I must say I'm not really rooting for either of them. And then, in that context, you might think, well, maybe at least the Hades character is kind of gloriously wicked in a way that you can kind of revel in and have fun with, because sometimes the villains are the most fun. But he's really not. He's just terrible. He's very creepy. The way the setup is done, it feels incredibly predatory and uncomfortable and unsettling. He's basically just 300 red flags super glued together with a trench coat thrown over them. And Corey, I mean, she's barely 18, so maybe it's realistic that she would not pick up on the numerous red flags, although she does. She just keeps turning off her own internal alarm system. And I mean, I guess the author isn't framing Hades and Persephone as a love story, but there's just nothing redeeming about this character so far. He seems to hate hate his kids, is creepy, hiding in shadows, watching her sleep, flying off the handle, and calling his own child a freak, and just generally being really terrible. You know, I think the only thing going for him is that he seems to be really rich and has a nice house on a remote island, except for the fact that he won't give her the Wi-Fi password so she can tell her mom that she's not dead. He's also a CEO of a pharmaceutical company, and so far there's been a lot of dabbling and a lot of casual recreational use of this new drug that they are trying to get approved that is supposed to be like some of the strongest drugs that are prescribed after surgery, like morphine or Oxycontin, but it's supposed to be with fewer side effects and not as addictive. And he's just constantly giving it to Corey to take recreationally or mixing it into cocktails for her, which is concerning on multiple levels, but he's coming across pretty evil. And I feel like I've read quite a few books recently with unlikable characters where I've ended up harping pretty heavily on the fact that the characters are unlikable as part of the reason why I don't like it. But I don't just flat out dislike unlikable characters. There are lots of characters I can think of that I've read over the years that are not likable or even despicable, but they're so interesting, or they're so well developed, or the things that the author is exploring through that character are so fascinating to me that I don't mind. But in this case, so far, I just don't see it. I'm not seeing the vision. So I'm feeling really conflicted because the writing is gorgeous, but so far it's feeling a little empty because the story it's telling is not connecting with me. I'm not really sure what I'm meant to be getting out of it, how I'm meant to be feeling about these characters. All I'm feeling so far is a sort of mild dislike, and I find myself sort of scowling as I read a lot because the characters will say or do things that I just find quite off-putting. And that's about it so far. So I don't know how to feel. I really don't know how to feel. I'm really hoping the second half will pull it out and turn it into something poignant, emotional, heartwarming, devastating, cutting, surprising. I don't know, anything to make it feel like there was a purpose. But so far, I don't know what the purpose of this is, which is making me sad because I was really hopeful for this one, and the writing is really nice, which makes me want to like it more than I am liking it, unfortunately. So that's where we're at with this, sadly. I guess I'll do a super short spoiler section just to touch on the specific situation I was hinting at between Corey and her mom that really rubbed me the wrong way. For anyone who's read this or knows for sure that they're never going to read this, and then I'm going to go finish it. Basically, the situation is that Corey in high school ends up being sexually assaulted. She doesn't tell anyone. Her life sort of starts to spiral. Rumors go around school that she cheated on her boyfriend and she's a whore and all kinds of horrible things. And she gets dropped from this new clique, and she starts trying to cope with this experience of being sexually assaulted by sort of disconnecting, and she stops studying and working hard at school, and her A's and B's start dropping to C's and D's, and she's starting to smoke weed more often and just kind of pulling back due to this traumatic event and not telling anyone or getting any kind of support. And then one night she ends up telling her mom, and her mom just says nothing and leaves the room, which is just horrific. And like I said, we eventually get the scene from her mom's perspective, and it's even worse. Her mom's internal monologue in this moment, she says, "But where I should have felt sympathy, I found I had gone cold. I tried to lay a hand on hers, but no, I couldn't move. I couldn't feel a thing. Problem was, I was broken too, long before and worse than she was." There's implications that she was pretty severely abused in childhood, which is terrible, but also like, you don't have to pit your suffering against your child's suffering. Just because you've gone through something that you think is maybe worse than what your child is going through doesn't mean that they don't deserve your empathy and support, especially when they've been raped. But anyway, she goes on, problem was I couldn't stand that she'd been broken too. Daughter of ignorance, she'd willfully ignored the statistics with which I'd armed her, the history in which I'd tutored her. Daughter of frivolity, when I tried to warn her, she treated me as if I were a stick in the mud, a prude. Daughter of neglect, she let herself be wounded. Like, all of this just feels like horrifically cruel victim blaming, and she's doing it in her internal monologue. At least she's not telling her daughter this, but what she's doing in this moment is sitting there in silence with a cold expression on her face before she gets up and leaves the room without giving any support to her daughter, and she never brings it up again or tries to support her daughter through this, which is like horrifically terrible parenting. I can't imagine any scenario where this wouldn't double down and amplify that trauma tenfold that she finally opened up to someone, and this is the reaction or lack of reaction that she gets. She goes on to say, so anger grew, quick as a cancer, around my grief for her. Anger at the boy who'd broken her, anger at her for being arrogant, beautiful, and dumb. I couldn't make this up. It's so terrible. And more and more and more. And then I didn't want her to harden as I have, but because I had, I could not feel for her. I could not even look her in the eye. The second worst thing that could ever happen happened, and forgive me, all I could do was stand and leave the room. I'm sorry, what? There's no way I can find sympathy for this person. I'm so sorry. Like, I understand trauma. It affects us in a variety of ways. I get it. But what a horrific way to handle that situation for your daughter. And also just all of her victim blaming, internal monologue, calling her daughter arrogant, beautiful, and dumb in the wake of her trying to get support for having been raped. Like, it just, no, it's so horrible. And as I was reading, I was just thinking, this can't possibly get worse. And then I read the next sentence and it got worse. I'm getting really riled up now because it just, holy shit, it's terrible. And maybe this isn't that kind of story. Going into it, I thought that we were going to be working towards a reconciliation at the end between them, some sort of healing of their relationship or some sort of transformation of their relationship moving forward as Corey enters adulthood and they kind of reshuffle their relationship and their dynamic. But I kind of feel like there's no coming back from that. Maybe there is for them. These fictional characters can get over it and flourish in their relationship. But for me as a reader, I'm not sure I can get over that, you know? Maybe she was great in other ways, but just that reaction to being told about her daughter's experience of assault, just, yeah, I don't know how to get over that, to be honest. Just the lack of empathy is staggering. So that's it for spoilers. I just talked about that for so long. It was meant to be a quick note clarifying why I wasn't a fan of the mom or their relationship, but I got a little heated there. So anyway, that's it for spoilers. I'm gonna stop talking. I'm just gonna go read the rest of this, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. I was gonna say bright and early, but I'm really not a morning person, so I'll just see you tomorrow and you'll hear my final thoughts. I hope they'll be more positive. Can't say I'm feeling that optimistic, but you know, maybe. It's the next morning. I finished this late last night and then I impulsively cut my bangs before I went to sleep. So they're now at an awkwardly short length, so just ignore. This didn't really do anything that it wasn't already doing in the first half, so all my criticisms and compliments apply. It was beautifully written. I really enjoyed the prose. As much as I found the lack of quotation marks annoying, I did like how it was written. I thought it was quite evocative, quite lyrical, quite lush and atmospheric, but it was all style, no substance, all form, no function, and that makes me sad because I feel like this had so much potential. It is so gorgeously written, but it's just empty. The characters are flat. They really don't have a lot of depth to them. Emer, our Demeter mother character, has the most depth to her, but still, she is a very poorly drawn character. And all the themes that this book is trying to explore, at the center, it is this complicated mother-daughter relationship and the importance and that enduring connection between a mother and child and the undying, powerful love of a mother. And I just couldn't get on board with it because, like I said in the first half, I didn't like Corey. I didn't like Emer, and they had a complicated relationship for a good reason. Corey had good reason to not trust her mother, to not want to tell her mother what she was doing, to not live with her mother. Her mother really let her down in a very fundamental, lasting, wounding way. And even the ending apology that we get from the mother is not even for the actual things she did wrong. It just left a bitter taste in my mouth. I didn't care about these characters. I especially didn't care about Rollo, our Hades. He was such a cartoonish villain. He had no redeeming qualities. He was very off-putting. And not only was he, as I described at the beginning, just hundreds of red flags in a trench coat, he ended up becoming more and more coercive and explicitly evil and abusive and harms Corey in irredeemable ways. And ever since I finished this last night, I've been sort of mulling it over and trying to think of more charitable interpretations of it. And I think the most charitable interpretation of this book is that the author was trying to say something about our current world of late-stage capitalism, of luxury without substance, of surrounding ourselves with beauty and pleasure without actually having that meaningful connection or real purpose to our lives underneath. And that she was trying to demonstrate that with a book that did the same thing. But I think that's just me trying to find a way to be nice to this book because the writing was so gorgeous and lush. It is beautiful writing. And if you don't care that the characters are all universally incredibly unlikable and dumb and have no personality, none of them really have a personality, to be honest, but Corey's personality is by far the most lacking. I have no idea what her interests are. I don't know who she is. And she was our primary protagonist through this whole book. I don't know. This didn't really do anything for me on a thematic level or on an emotional level. I didn't care about the characters. I wasn't rooting for redemption or a reunion for mother and daughter. I couldn't even get that angry at Rollo, even though he is pretty indisputably evil because he is so bland. Like, he's just a stand-in for every pharmaceutical CEO or rich billionaire bastard who has a thing for barely legal, confused girls. I don't know. There wasn't enough here for me personally. And the themes, it felt like it was trying to, like I said, dive into that, unending motherly love, that mama bear fierceness and connection between mother and child, and dipping its toe a little bit into colonization and white saviorism and pharmaceutical companies and the evil they bring and class disparities, wealth inequality, late stage capitalism, all kinds of things. It also tried to dip its toe into misogyny and harms perpetrated on women and trauma and healing or lack thereof, but I just didn't feel like it really tackled any of those with any real sincerity or depth at all. Everything was so surface level and so just tossed in there without any real exploration or introspection. It just felt like words with no meaning behind them. And the words were beautiful. Beautiful words aren't enough for me if there is nothing underneath. And it just felt like there was nothing underneath, and that's sad. I also found the ending quite disappointing. I understand why the author chose to end this book that way, but I found it kind of baffling within the context of this particular story and these particular characters. And it's just kind of enraging, but mildly enraging, because I really can't bother myself to feel intense hatred or frustration. It's just kind of low-key annoying and disappointing. And I ended up finishing the book and just feeling, well, all those characters were insufferable. And I'm glad the book is over. So that's Fruit of the Dead. I'm greatly disappointed. I had so much hope for this. I was really excited about the premise. The cover is absolutely gorgeous, but the cover, I guess, is just once again an example of what this book is. It's beautiful on the outside. It's beautiful on the surface, but these pages are quite empty. So those are my thoughts on Fruit of the Dead. I will do a quick spoiler section to clarify a couple points. In case anyone wants to read this, you can skip over the spoiler section and read it. I wouldn't really recommend it unless you're just in the mood for are pretty word salad that doesn't mean anything. But sometimes that can be nice. No judgment there, if that's what you want. I just feel like there are other beautifully written books with lush descriptions and the atmospheric quality and a sort of slightly surreal quality to it that have more to say, you know? So I'm going to give Fruit of the Dead 2 stars, and I'm going to now do a quick spoiler section. So spoilers for Fruit of the Dead. So again, the reason why I was really not rooting for Emer as a mother and not buying her, deep abiding love is the fact that she gave her daughter zero support when she came to her sobbing, telling her about being sexually assaulted. And it's supposed to be made all better that she lost her job and dedicated weeks of her life to finding her daughter at any cost and getting her away from this billionaire man. Even though she eventually makes it there and does bring her daughter away, she doesn't do it in time to save her daughter from being sexually assaulted again. And that's not her fault, but I'm just saying. And she never apologizes for not supporting her daughter. She says, I'm sorry for not telling you stories I should have told you to try to protect you, even though you never could have really been protected anyway. That's paraphrasing, but pretty close to what she says, which is like, okay, maybe you could have told your daughter about your experiences of being abused, but that pales in comparison to you actually supporting your daughter in the moment when she needed your support. And I can't get over it. Sorry, I can't. Do not like Emer. Do not think that her actions at any point in the novel redeem her complete letting down of her daughter in that moment and complete lack of introspection and apology for that at any point. The ending is that Emer arrives there on the ferry the day after Rollo finally sexually assaults Corey, and it is unequivocally a sexual assault. And Corey is so distraught in the morning that she self-harms and then runs away to the forest with as many of these pain pills as she can grab, and the implication is that she might be about to end her life. And then her mom gets there, and it's like, oh, her mom saved her life and finally saved her from this evil man. And as they're leaving, she opens something that Rollo gave her, and it's the check for $20,000. He paid her what he promised for a summer of nannying, and she's laughing and feeling happy and saying, oh, he's going to give me great references, and thinks about how long the pills she stole are going to last her, and muses on the fact that she will be returning presumably for more pills, and thinks of Rollo as someone who she both pities and loves in a weird way because she can see how lonely he is, and only she can fill that hole. She's molded herself into the shape that fills the hole of loneliness in this apparently pitiable man's heart when really this man is just a monster. And that's the ending, which again, I get that the author might have felt the need to set up that she would be returning again and again, and her being addicted to these pills is certainly a motivation for her to come back again and again. And that is something that, relates to the original myth, but it's just very depressing in the context of this book and isn't satisfying as an ending at all. And I really just didn't feel like the ending did anything particularly moving. There, are moments that are trying to make us feel that mother bear, female rage, protection instinct of her mom. And Corey's thinking, this isn't the mom I knew. She's not uptight. She's a warrior woman. And she's like looking at her in awe, and you can see that maybe they would heal their relationship. And again, I'm just not buying it, nor am I that invested. So disappointing. And Corey, again, she has no personality and she's not likable at any point, but also her one redeeming quality for me is that she seems to be quite tender with the kids. She's a terrible caregiver because she is constantly high and constantly leaves without making sure anyone is watching the kids. So she's terrible at her job and doesn't really seem to care that much about the kids' safety, but she does seem to care about them on an emotional level, and she's quite sweet with them. So that was the one redeeming quality for me, is that she seemed to like the kids and she was sweet to them, even though she was a terrible caregiver and not responsible. But in the very end, they're leaving with their mom, and she's feeling so mad at the mom for trying to take her with them and telling her, I know what you're going through. I was you. He, plucked me out of obscurity when I was your age, and I gave him all of my 20s and I regret it. Please come with me. And she's pissed off at his ex-wife's jealousy. And so she decides instead to go in the water and come out in her soaking white t-shirt with her nipples hard and showing through the shirt because, of course, for some reason, and to lie down and just be unbothered in her own world as the kids are calling to her and trying to say goodbye, and sad that they're leaving her behind and she doesn't even bother to go over and say goodbye because she wants to be unbothered and get back at Rollo's ex-wife for daring to offer to help her get away. Yeah. I'm not happy about this, honestly. It was such a waste of beautiful writing. I am curious about this author because I do think her writing is beautiful and I'd love to read more of it, but I would just love for her to have more of a clear vision of what she's trying to do and to do it with more depth and vulnerability and really allow those complexities to crack open and sort of comb through it all and really get into it, you know, hinting at profound things, but not actually saying anything real. And that's disappointing to me. So that is this book. 2 stars, unfortunately. I really wanted to get a 5-star in this video, but unfortunately that was not in the cards for me, apparently. Part of me thinks that maybe I'm being too harsh, but I do think that, you know, obviously I'm biased, but I think my critiques are fair. And as much as I'd love to be able to give one of these books 5 stars, I feel like they need to earn it, you know? They have to be a 5-star book first for me to give them 5 stars, you know? So that's kind of a sad way to end this video, but we do have 2 4-star reads in The Old Man Who Read Love Stories and Walking Practice. And I didn't hate the experience of reading this, again, because the writing was quite beautiful, but it was a frustrating experience because I kept wanting more from it that it just wasn't willing to give. So that's this video, 48 hours of reading. I didn't read any huge tomes. I didn't find a new favorite of all time, but I did finish 3 books that were on my physical TBR, and I can proudly move them from my TBR bookshelf over to my finished books bookshelves. So that's good, you know. 3 books from my 25 and 2025 down. I feel pretty good about that. And hopefully, you know, maybe someone out there will hear my descriptions of these and, you know, there will be the perfect reader for each of these that will find a book that otherwise they wouldn't have come across, and maybe you'll find a new favorite, even though these weren't new favorites for me. So that's it for me. Thank you again to Magic Mind for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in my description box to get 45% off their exclusive bundle of the Mental Performance Shot and the Sleep Elixir. That's 45% off with the link in my description box. Thank you again to Magic Mind for sponsoring this video. Let me know your thoughts on these if you have read any of these. I would be very curious to know. Again, I feel like these are maybe slightly more obscure, especially these 2. So I really don't know how many of you will have read them, but if you have, I would love to hear your thoughts, whether you agree with me or not. Please share them because I need to talk with people about them. And with that, I'm gonna get going. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.